bad.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Vence, also known as Ricky Varandas. This is a long interview, so I'll try to keep this intro short so we can get right into it. Jason Burmes, filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, researcher, YouTuber. He's back on the show, one of the first guests ever on the show, and has been on many times since. So go back in the archives. He's done plenty of interviews, and we've had plenty of discussions together. Always a fun conversation. Today we focus on the censorship of social media, of YouTube. We also focus a lot on PLANdemic, the documentary that's going viral. We talk about the information that's in there. Can it be debunked? Is it debunked? Is it not? Is it a right-wing conspiracy theory documentary? Is it not? And I truly want people to watch the documentary with an open mind, listen to this conversation with an open mind, and then be the judge, I guess. But just remember that people like Jason, people like myself, all we're trying to do is spread information, honestly seeking truth. That's all we're trying to do, and trying to spread information that we think can help people. And like the quote I say over and over again in this podcast, it's easier to trick somebody than convince them they've been tricked. And I think in many cases people have been tricked with this COVID-19 hysteria. So I'm not saying it's fake. I'm not saying it's real. I'm not saying anything. Listen to the conversation and just have a honest opinion on what we're saying. And some people who have alternative perspectives. James Corbett's been doing awesome work on this. Jason Bermas has been doing awesome work on this. The No Agenda podcast has been doing awesome work on this. So many people have, that The Last American Vagabond has been doing awesome work on this. So many, even Valuetainment, London Real, they've been awesome with not being afraid to have alternative perspectives on their show. And look into all of it. Watch it. Honestly, try not to be biased and try to not even care who is putting out the information. It's more important to just look at the information. When I hear right-wing conspiracy theorists or whatever, it tells me that you're obviously not looking at the information with an open mind. You've already made a decision that's a conspiracy theory documentary or it's a right-wing documentary or whatever. But we talk about all that on the podcast, so I'll keep this short. Remember, in the show description, I'll put links to Jason Burmes's YouTube channel, all his social media accounts. Remember to support him. Remember, if you want to support me, I have a Patreon page. You'll see the links for that in the show description. You'll also see links to my music. If you want to support the show, purchase the music if you like the music you hear in the podcast. But most importantly, spread these conversations. Share it. It's all open source. You can spread it, upload it, put it anywhere you want. And thank you, everybody who has been sharing the podcast, everybody who has been spreading these conversations. I truly appreciate it. Also, everybody who's financially supporting the show, I truly, truly appreciate it. And I think that's it for now, guys. Stay safe, stay sane, enjoy the conversation, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace. Everybody's been seeing that documentary that's been floating around.
PLANdemic, it's actually trending all over Twitter right now, like crazy trending.
Well, it's because it was trending yesterday, and then all of a sudden I was going to show my wife how. I'm like, holy crap, it's trending.
Oh, they took it down already.
Yes.
Yeah, trend again.
I was going to tell you.
There are 106,000 tweets right now.
And who knows how accurate that is?
Yeah, no shit. Well, conspiracy theory has fucking 14,000 fucking tweets right now. And then PLANdemic documentary has another 4,000. So, I mean, we go on and on and on. But I watched it yesterday, and it's funny. I mean, I guess we'll just talk about it on the thing. Like I said, I'm ready to go. We can do this.
We can start right now. Yeah. I mean, the film. You know, it's funny because I've already had people tell me that it's a right wing conspiracy theory documentary, and I'm just like, well, what? Like, anytime I want to talk to somebody about the actual points that are being made, I'm like, well, let's discuss each point. Which point do you think is a right-wing conspiracy theory? Which point are you saying isn't valid? I mean, there's clips of Dr. Birx in there describing how coronavirus or deaths by or with are basically the same. And like, so there's clips like that. There's clips of Dr. Fauci. I mean, this stuff, like, are they manipulating that? Is that fake? I mean, this thing has become, I mean, I like the fact that there's people that I've, even close friends of mine on Facebook and social media and just friends I've been text messaging back and forth who have, you know, I've given them information, but it seems like they're still a little skeptical. Yesterday, they're all sending me this documentary. I'm like, listen, I'm already watching the documentary. I'm like, she's been on a bunch of podcasts. She was on Valuetainment, which I give a lot of props to, because similar to London Real and Brian Rose, this is, I mean, he was very well known for his Kobe Bryant interview he did. You know, he did one of the last, you know, long form interviews with Kobe Bryant before he passed away. I mean, this guy is not a conspiracy theorist. He's not, I mean, he's kind of like London Real, where they have people who are businessmen, they have athletes, they have a little bit of everything on the show, but he's been willing to dive deep into this topic. He had Dr. Buttar on, he had, you know, he had Robert Kennedy Jr. on. He, you know, London Real did the same thing. And he also had Dr. Judy, however you pronounce her last name.
Skavitz.
Yeah, Miktovitz, or yeah, something like that.
Miktovitz, I think it is. And, you know, Valuetainment, I've watched a lot of this stuff. You know, he had Alex Jones on. Probably his most famous one, at least he did two of them with him, was Michael Francesi, the former mafia boss. So, yeah, like you said, there, you know, he's one of those guys that does interesting interviews, but usually doesn't go outside of the realm of political correctness, but at the same time isn't afraid to give those people their voices. And as far as the PLANdemic documentary, first of all, it's short form. It's even more short form than, say, the viral Coney video, right? Which was probably the last one to go that level of viral at 45 minutes. And this one's about 25. I thought it was really well produced. I thought that what I liked about it better than, say, the Epoch Times or Epic Times documentary, the CCP virus, is that it did not call it the CCP virus. And instead of just focusing on the Wuhan lab, it actually talked about the two different institutions, Fort Detrick and the other one in the United States, which I think is extremely important. At the same time, she wasn't willing to go as far as to say it was a bioweapon, only that it was biologically engineered and obviously not natural, which is another thing that I think is important. But for the most part, for me, it's worrisome that when you have these doctors, okay, that have patients, that have practices, that are down in New York City. Cameron Siddell, probably the most important one to me at this point, and I'll get into why in a moment. They're all being silenced. So now it's not, I'm a conspiracy theorist, Jason Burmes, or I don't like what that person's saying about flat Earth. It's literal medical professionals describing what's going on, and then when it gets too big, all of a sudden just YouTube, Facebook, they censor it outright. And if you look at these doctors, you know, I also think it's important to point out that they're not saying that the disease isn't real. You know, my video on those two doctors was a lot different than what everybody else was putting out, because I played the last 12 minutes of it when they're like, look, yeah, it's real, and yeah, New York got hit hard, but that's a condensed city, as I've been saying. And he goes, where they're literally 6 inches away from each other on a subway. He's like, what do you expect? All right. And the media completely ignored that aspect of it. And even people that just want to read headlines and kind of have confirmation bias posted the same thing, right? They posted the 2-minute clip show of those guys instead of their two parts of their full press conference, which lasted over an hour. Now, Cameron Siddell, on the other hand, he comes out really within the first week of this hitting New York City very hard and straight up saying what no one else was saying at the time. In fact, it came out a day after I had talked to both my nurse source in Queens and over in Stony Brook. And my one in Queens was adamant then that they were putting people on ventilators too fast and that people were not coming off of them. And people are looking at me like, oh, Jason, you're crazy. There's no one in there. There's no one on ventilators, et cetera, et cetera. This guy comes out and says, look, They're telling you this is a pneumonia-like virus. They're telling you this is ARDS. That is not what this is. And if we keep treating people with these ventilators on the settings we're using, we are going to kill a lot of people. People ignored that. Now, there are different settings on that, but the reality was that at the time, if you had gone on one of those ventilators, depending in the ICU, 70 to 90% chance you die. Now, like the doctors over in California pointed out, they said, look, just so everybody understands, if you are on a ventilator for anything, you got a 50-50 shot. You're not in great shape. Those are not good medical numbers. Okay, so to go further and say this is how we're treating it when Sedell continuously, and that video went semi-viral, not as viral as others, again, because it wasn't that narrative that it's all fake, right? But viral enough where he actually got a piece in the New York Times, other doctors, and see, that's where it's allowed. An authoritative source amplifies it a little bit. And I do believe that they have saved some patients down there because of that. At the same time, what goes viral 3 days ago, a nurse from out of state, that is one of those nurses that got brought into New York City, and she's just disgusted with the use of these ventilators in her unit. People have to realize there's just so many hotels in these boroughs. When you have a condensed area of 10 million people, you know, you're going to get differences. But I believed every word she said. You know, it has to be heartbreaking trying to go to bat for a patient and say, listen, we need to put him on a BiPAP or a CPAP. How much has the mainstream media talked about the nitric oxide treatment that's working for doctors? Again, Sedell is saying this isn't ARDS. This is an oxygen deprivation disease that turns into something else. Okay, so for those that don't know what nitric oxide is, everybody's like, oh, boner pills, Jason. No, it was also a supplement I used in the late 90s. NO2 kind of exploded on the scene after creatine because it gives you your vascular system, it opens it up and allows more oxygen in. So why isn't that?
Yeah, I used them this morning.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty easy treatment of oxidized nitric oxides to open up the vascular system. Yet I've only heard it once or twice.
Yeah, you can buy them. You can buy just nitric oxide alone pretty cheap. I mean, if you look up pre-workouts, because there's more stuff in the formula, usually there's creatine and it's kind of you know, they put other stuff in there, maybe amino acids or whatnot. But if you buy nitric oxide alone, which is basically the most important ingredient in pre-workouts, because that's what gets you a couple more reps and gets you, you know, it gives people that pump because it is helping bring more oxygen, more blood flow to your muscles. That's why it makes you veinier when you're working out and you're using it. But if you buy it alone, super cheap. So that's obviously, like you said, why it's not being discussed. Yeah.
Yeah, L-Arginine. I mean, for anybody that doesn't know, it's not hard to get. I actually take one with a supplement of pills in the morning just to kind of keep my immune system up. And it's not even part of my workout system. I remember when I was 19 and I read the whole book on it, you know, the guy that was like putting it out, and I was like, wow, this is interesting. And I did the load phase and I did the, you know, the come off it every 3 months stuff. But I never saw any negative side effects. I mean, you overdo anything and there could be a negative side effect. Yeah. But once again, not being promoted by the mainstream. And then you have other doctors that are saying, yes, we should be doing these intravenous vitamin C infusions, not just the vitamin C, but again, something they refuse to talk about. What? Steroids. All right. Different types of steroid treatments go with that. Everybody wants to demonize steroids, but they've been used time and time again in immunodeficiency diseases. Look into how many HIV patients went on steroids and survived. Why? Because it boosted their immune system. They took those steroids, they worked out, and it turned their whole thing around because it started to up their white blood cell count. You know, these are things that just aren't talked about in the mainstream whatsoever. And I feel like, all right, you want to demonize Jason Burmes for talking about it. That's fine. When I do it, I usually bring up the articles or I bring up the medical papers that are out there just in case anyone wants to go after me. But when an actual doctor is saying it, I mean, my Lord, where are we in 2020 that actual medical professionals can no longer give their medical advice unless a little man with glasses named Tony Fauci says it's okay? This is insanity.
Well, the YouTube CEO, when she was doing the interview and she's like talking about any medical information, like vitamin C can cure yourself of the virus, will be removed, and all this stuff. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, listen, we know we've been saying, and everybody knows, just the coronavirus, like any virus, if you have a weak immune system, it can harm you. And if you have a strong immune system, chances are you'll be symptomatic. You won't have really any effects from it, any symptoms. So if somebody's saying vitamin C, which has been proven and known for centuries that can help increase the strength of your immune system, if they're saying that it can fight the virus, why is that disinformation? Why is that dangerous information? I mean, that's ridiculous. Like, people know vitamin C can help. So we know, like, even if you believe vaccines work, if you believe the vaccine science, okay, you're still trying to spark your own immune system. You're basically believing that your body is the best defense against this virus. So you're basically trying to, pop start your immune system by putting a virus so it can create the antivirus. So the idea that they're considering that disinformation or dangerous information, the Valuetainment interview with Dr. Judy, that was online until this documentary went viral. Then they pulled it. It was online earlier yesterday because that documentary was going viral. And I'm like, hey, if you guys want to see another interview with her, here's one. And I like sharing that one because I think she's also done one on the Last American Vagabond and a couple other places. But that one was like, okay, I'm not going to get somebody telling me that, like, hey, that host is a conspiracy theorist or that website's a conspiracy theorist. So I figured it was, and Patrick's kind of open-minded, and he was asking questions, and he didn't seem like he was trying to pick a side or had an agenda, and it gets removed. It wasn't dangerous until it went viral, but yet the Robert Kennedy interview is still up, and a lot of Dr. Buttar, which was like one of 50th, I guess top 50 doctors in the U.S. I mean, his interviews are still up, and they're all saying the same thing. So it's
not always. So Gary Franchi at Next News Network, he got his Buttar interview pulled after 3.5 million views. So there seems to be a threshold, right, for censorship. If it goes viral too quickly, they flag it everywhere. And as you know, a little guy like me gets targeted and gets completely demonetized for my channel on YouTube a month ago yesterday. No explanation. I didn't even get the form email that told me it was harmful content. The only form email I got was telling me that my super chat had been disabled. And then I actually had to go over, and it said, you've been demonetized, no explanation, no videos given, no copyright strikes ever at all, whether it be news copyright or content or like I broke terms of service. My channel's from 2007. Okay. So, I mean, I have 1,200 videos. They've told me nothing. They want me to re-examine my channel and then reapply. Well, I'm going to reapply live on air later today. I just pray to God that they don't dare take my channel away, because I'm telling you right now, if they take my channel away, I'm going to YouTube Studios, and they will have to drag me away from there in cuffs before I stop, because I'm done. I'm done with this. The idea that you can retroactively censor me and selectively enforce these arbitrary rules of speech is absolute insanity. I will debate any of your CEOs. I will debate any of your medical experts. I will debate any of your authoritative sources that you have propped up, because I feel like if Tucker Carlson says the same thing that I do, he is shielded by the Fox brand. Now, I don't agree with everything Tucker Carlson says. I'm actually happy he's out there in a lot of ways talking about this. I think that he's pushed the Chinese virus narrative too much, but he's also pushed for the fact that this is not only Orwellian, but that it has people clamoring for totalitarianism, which is what this is. So it's just so curious to me that my numbers are through the roof, man. I took this channel that had not been used in literally 7 years. And in a year and a half's time, really a year's time of going live all the time, making it a full-time gig, I gained almost 50,000 subscribers. My average watch time for the year was just under 10 minutes per video. Those are insane numbers for anybody that doesn't know what YouTube analytics are. The average viral video that goes out there, or somebody that you watch, maybe Rogan gets better numbers because he's doing 3-hour podcasts, has a huge audience. But for people that are doing, for the most part, which is what I do, 10 to 20-minute videos, I do hour ones every once in a while. The idea that you even get 3 minutes of watch time for Google is insane. My impression click-through rate is an average of over 5. That is ridiculous. Some of my click-through rates are 17+%. And yet they still don't want to do business with me. Why? Because my voice is too dangerous. They know that it cannot be controlled or culled. I'm going to say what I feel like is the truth. And if I'm wrong, I will correct myself. I can't tell you, Ricky, how happy I was that the military did not close off New York City, that there was a pushback from Cuomo. If there's anything I'm going to give the guy credit for, and it's not much, especially in the last week and a half, going to both Bill Gates to reimagine our education system, and then yesterday live streaming with Eric Schmidt to reimagine New York State as a whole, that's scary. But at the same time, he did push back on the military. When they started going door to door in Rhode Island looking for New Yorkers, he threatened to sue. I was like, all right, we can get there. That doesn't mean that it's okay that there were drones going up in the city telling people to social distance and get away. You know, it's a mixed bag. I'm not saying to trust the guy, but look, at the point things were moving so quickly in March from 0 to 60 like that, and to the point that we were, I just didn't see anything else happening. You know, I knew that New Rochelle wasn't really a hot zone like they had said. More testing proved that later. That seems to be under control now. But it was a staging ground for the military. And I'll just say this, you know, I'm far enough upstate New York where my chief of police has not enforced anything. They went around, don't get me wrong, the bars are shut. They've ticketed nobody. They don't want a part of this. I have talked to the local police. They're like, we will not go door to door no matter what they tell us, which is good. Even further upstate, when those protests went down last week and the media totally ignored them, not only did you have protesters in Suffolk County, which is, you know, one of those hot zones in Long Island, geographically a much smaller area than where I'm at, but when you went to Fulton County, it was the head of the sheriff's department that was leading the protests. Where's that? How are you going to tell me he's a white supremacist Nazi like the Michigan protesters? They can't, so they just ignore it, you know? And the other thing is that that Facebook has said that they will take down your video, and YouTube has taken down videos, especially from Dan Dix, who covered protests in Toronto, if you start posting stuff about the lockdown protests. Excuse me. I'm outside as a member of the media covering a protest in America, and because you don't like what the public is protesting, it is no longer able to be seen on the second largest search engine in the world. How about you fuck right off? Like, I'm sorry, you're the number one and the number two search engine in the world. Okay? Alphabet is Google, is YouTube. People have to understand that. And now you have the founder of that, Eric Schmidt, the Bilderberg steering member, Mr. New World Order in 2008. I did a whole video about his digital New World Order speech, where he actually calls it a New World Order, by the way, where Android was just coming out. And all of these things have come into fruition, right? This track trace database society, they're not even being shy about it anymore. So why do I not want somebody who is part of the predator class deciding what happens to my state when he has never won an election? And when they tried to kind of like obfuscate him from the company of Google, right? Put him as a consultant during the Me Too movement. What was he out doing? He was out helping China with their censored version of Google, Dragonfly. But that's the guy we want to reimagine New York. It's like, get the fuck out of here with this shit.
Well, yeah, and the thing is that people are, you know, in a way, I just did a podcast with the CT Freedom Alliance. They're from Connecticut. It's a group of, you know, basically they're not anti or pro vaccine or anti or pro anything. They're just pro freedom, and people, you know, fighting for religious exemptions. And actually just on their page yesterday, they had the CDC whistleblower, not the CDC whistleblower, but the guy, Brian Hooker, who got the information from the CDC whistleblower on, they did an interview with them. And, you know, this people keep calling people like, you know, like fault lines in the morning. I listen to them from time to time. It's, you know, I like both hosts, but anybody who says anything against the mainstream narrative, they're like, I'm sick of people saying that there's not a virus. People are not, you know, it's like nobody's saying there's not a virus. Same thing with this documentary. People are saying she's an anti-vaxxer. She says in the documentary she's not anti-vax. She's not anti-vaccines. I mean, and some of the things. Let's just go over some of the things she talks about in the documentary, which people are saying, the documentary has been debunked. Here's stuff that, without a doubt, is true. And like you said, unfortunately, if you heard it on Fox News on Tucker Carlson, it'd be okay. But if she says it, all of a sudden it's false information, it's fake news, it's conspiracy theories or whatever. But like the fact that there's never been a RNA vaccine that works, that's true. I mean, that she says that in the documentary, it's true. She talks about the Bayh-Dole Act. That's also something that is really important. A lot of people have the same opinion on. The Wuhan lab, obviously, they're getting $3.7 million. That's been documented. People know they did get a lot of money. It's been documented. There's plenty of articles stating that there were some concerns about some of their tests they were doing. The Fort Detrick lab, that was shut down for some concerns about their tests too. They were fine and whatnot. That's also true. I mean, you can go on and on with the stuff that she talked about that is true. I mean, Dr. Fauci being anti-hydroxychloroquine, a generic drug that's been used over and over again by many, many doctors, and people have been having success with it. And the side effects are basically zero. I mean, I've heard Dr. Drew talk about this, how he's given it to people, and he's friends with Dr. Fauci, and he's talked about just about zero side effects to it. So there's no reason not to give it to some people who want to use it. So it's obvious that they're pushing that away. The fact that the Pentagon had a study, they gave out flu vaccines, obviously, to their people, and 36, I think it was 37% of them were more likely to get a coronavirus, because of it. I mean, that's also documented. I mean, that's a study by the Pentagon. Like, so this is stuff that she talked about in the documentary. What part of this sounds like a conspiracy theory? What part of this sounds right wing? I mean, the problem is politics ends up skewing everything. Like, if Fox, listen, during the whole Iraq war, Afghanistan war, when that was all getting started, yeah, I mean, there wasn't a lot of good news on Fox News or anything really worth watching. But even then, if they said something that was factual and made sense, I'd share the article. I don't care. And same thing with MSNBC, CNN, whoever it is. If they have an article that makes sense and I look into it and it's like, well, this is a good article, regardless if the source is this person or this website, you're going to share it. But too often people get so political where just like now it seems like a lot of the outspoken people are the pro-Trump people, the people who are questioning what's going on because they think they're trying to take him down. So now the other side is saying, well, if everybody who's pro-Trump is saying that, there's an agenda going on right now and being pushed, then this must be a Republican Democrat thing, and I must defend my party, and that's what's going on. And so people have made something that isn't political. I mean, Robert Kennedy Jr., does that name sound like a Republican to you? He is saying a lot of the same stuff. So to me, like, the fact that people are saying this is a right-wing a right-wing documentary or whatever, it's like, what part of this is right-wing? I mean, Dr. Fauci has worked for Republicans and Democrats, so it's like he's worked for both parties, so he's been an advisor for both parties, but politicians on both sides. So I don't understand like how this can be right-wing or left-wing, but they do such a good job of just like immediately discrediting something. And the most frustrating part is like, soon after talking to somebody, you realize they haven't looked into it at all. I mean, I got in a discussion with a friend of mine this morning, and he's like, well, she's an anti-vaxxer. And I'm like, first of all, she's not an anti-vaxxer. And second of all, I'm like, people who say, vaccines can cause injuries, that's complete nonsense and whatever. I'm like, I have kids. I'm like, have you ever been to a pediatrician and asked for the inserts? Have you ever read the warnings on there? Have you ever been to the CDC website and looked for the warnings? I'm like, I've shared those on social media and circled the part that says may cause neurological issues, may cause death, may cause cognitive issues, all these things. I'm like, so even they say it, like, they don't know anything about a vaccine court. They don't know that billions have been given out to families. So it's not saying that everybody who gets a vaccine is going to be injured. We're just saying that if I give everybody in the world peanut butter, some might have an allergic reaction to it. So if I give a cocktail of something to every child in the world, some might have allergic reaction to it. And that's just basic understanding of science and how we all differ in our reactions to certain things and certain substances. So that's the reason why one diet doesn't necessarily, affect everybody the exact same way. So it's not controversial. It's not a controversial opinion on something, but it's amazing how many people fight back. And I'm sure, because you're much like myself, outspoken, you're willing to have discussions with people. And I mean, isn't it sometimes frustrating how little research, like soon into the conversation, you can see this person has not looked into this at all. They picked a team and they're just defending it. And it's frustrating.
Well, let's talk about like the two different aspects of that, right? So when you say right wing, it seems like especially the big tech companies have tried to frame everything they can into left, right, or conspiracy theory. And more, right and conspiracy theory are the same thing, right? Fake news. Well, fake news has been around forever. Look at the 93 World Trade Center bombing. Look what happened in Waco in the 90s. This isn't a new phenomenon. Look how they lied to you about Vietnam. Look into Jonestown. Even the term drinking the Kool-Aid, folks, hate to tell you, most of them didn't drink the Kool-Aid. They were gunned down. Let me repeat that. They were gunned down running away in a place where they were being mind controlled. Okay, and is that dangerous to say? Factually, 50 years later, it may be, but it's the truth, right? And the truth is something that people are sometimes not comfortable with because it's not framed up that way. And now I want to talk about mutual exclusivity, right? Because especially during this coronavirus, that was the big thing. Jason, you're a fear monger. There were some people telling me, this virus isn't real. Nobody's actually getting this. Everybody that's being diagnosed is being misdiagnosed, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, listen, it's not a mutually exclusive idea that this virus is real. This is happening. And I'm against the lockdown. I'm against the response because automatically, as soon as I say that, oh, you want to be locked in your house? No, I'm not happy with how they chose to deal with it whatsoever. That doesn't mean that we haven't been factually attacked by what I believe to be a bioweapon. And then I lay out my case. And unless that person's really willing to open their mind, and many are not, they want to battle and battle and battle and battle and battle. What was the headline on that nurse yesterday? It was, or 2 days ago, that nurse that went viral. People not dying of COVID-19. Now, the people that did not watch that video, they just assumed that she said no one had it. No, she was saying that they weren't dying, of the virus. They were being killed by the treatment of the ventilators in many of these cases. That's a very different thing, right? And for some reason that people just don't want to delve that far. They don't want to read any of the documentation from the Lancet study. They don't want to read about the 2008 Nobel laureate, who I tend to disagree with in some of it. This is the guy that gets the Nobel Prize in 2008, one of the guys along with Miskovitz that did identify HIV and AIDS first. And he says, look, the HIV sequence has to be inserted in a laboratory. And that was after he was challenged on it by the host, who said, well, what about the possibility that this mutated from an HIV patient? Again, not the normal narrative, a question outside of the box, and then him refuting it. Now, he says not a biological weapon in his opinion. He thinks that it was, something that was biologically made in order to go for a vaccine for HIV that escapes the lab, then goes into an animal, then goes into a bat, then goes into a human. I disagree with that part, but I do point out that he says, look, has to be made in a lab. Judy says, has to be made in the lab. Lancet says, has to be made in the lab. That same Nobel laureate says, look at the Indian paper out of India that's being suppressed that is saying has to be made in the lab, right? All of those things are only allowed to be said in the context of, say, a Sean Hannity that tells you definitely Wuhan lab, definitely not a weapon, and also did that process of animal, pangolin, human. You dare go outside of that box at this point, and you're going to get banned. It's just like when you first went outside of the box of natural virus from a bat and you were zero hedge, you got banned, right? And that's the big issue. So many people have never took the time to do their own research and are just very, very happy of listening to a talking head that says some things that are confirming their own bias over a 22 to 44 minute period with a ton of commercials, right? That's still most people. And it's unfortunate, man. And what I always try to do and always have tried to do is reach out to people like that, find a point of agreement first, and work your way out from the middle. Because sometimes if you just go forward, full throttle, they don't want to hear it. They won't hear it, right? You're shill. You know, you're a shill, you're a liar, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're a Trump supporter. And, you know, that's the thing. If you agree with anything that Trump says or does, like hydroxychloroquine could be used as a treatment, oh, you're one of those MAGA heads. No.
Hydroxychloroquine has been on the list of essential medicine for like, I don't know, 50, 60, 70. I mean, who knows how many years? It's been
years, 6 plus.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So it's crazy. And this is the thing is, so I think, and I'd like your opinion on this, how much of people who look like they haven't looked into it, how many of them maybe have? But the problem is, and I just had Zach on, you know, the Google whistleblower a couple weeks ago, but they're force-fed. Back in the day when me and you started, or well, I mean, you started way before I did. You're the reason why I started some of your work. But you know, it wasn't that hard to run into alternative perspectives. It wasn't super hard to get videos that gave me a different outlook and get alternative news and media. But today, even if you are doing research, if they're not people like yourself or myself who've been in this world for a long time and kind of know the trusted journalists, the trusted websites, and you can kind of go directly to their work and look for it. The average person who's trying to do their own research today, who are new and trying to go down the rabbit hole today, they can't find that rabbit hole because they're force-fed MSNBC, Fox News, CNN, CBS, which is, I mean, how many times can they just put out fake information? I mean, Tim Pool just did a good little video on his Timcast podcast about CBS. But, you know, you look at it, you know, you can't even do your own research and find any credible stuff because anything you're finding is, I mean, if you go to Wikipedia for Dr. Judy, the first lines of it is she's an anti-vaxxer conspiracy theorist. The first line. And guess what? If I put in her name in Google right now, the first thing that comes up is her Wikipedia page. So that's the stuff that people are getting. So sometimes it's like I do get a little worked up, and it's like, oh, they haven't looked into it, and they're saying they have, but by the way this discussion is going, it seems like they haven't looked into it. But now that I think about it, during this conversation with you, like I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, if they did look at it, if they're not lying and they did look at it, if they don't know where to look, they might still be getting the same information, and they maybe seem ignorant because of the fact that they can't get any alternative perspective from a reasonable person, you know, like a Valuetainment that gets pulled down. You know, that's a reasonable person. London Real, I mean, reasonable people. They both have had best-selling authors. I mean, like I said, they've had Kobe Bryant on. I mean, they're reasonable people who are just open. I mean, you look at Brian Rose, what he said in the beginning of his podcast with one of the David Icke interviews. He's like, I don't agree with everything you say, but I'll defend your right to say it. And that's what we should all be saying. Because if not, then we've decided that we're too dumb to make our own decisions, to come up with our own conclusions, and we're okay with somebody telling us what truth is or what fact is or what perspective we should entertain and which ones aren't even worth entertaining. Like, that is dangerous.
No, 100%. And the thing is, you know, I want to read this conversation I had with Ben Askren, the MMA fighter and wrestler. So I'm gonna be doing a live stream with Ben and Front Row Bryant during the UFC on Saturday. We're gonna do the full thing from the first fight on the early prelims, like 6 o'clock on. And they just reached out to me this week via, you know, the Rockfin platform, and the fact that, you know, I seem to know what I'm doing on there, and I've garnered a lot of things. So we've been talking back and forth, and he said to me yesterday, he goes, hey, Jason, not to fanboy, but loose change red pilled me. I'm sure you get that a lot. And I replied this way. I go, thanks, brother. Yeah, that was the day of the doc when you could still go viral. So much tougher these days with the big tech environment. Although that PLANdemic doc that's 25 minutes long is doing well today, but it has been taken down all over. And all it is an interview with Judy Miskovitz for the most part. Hope it ends up biting them in the ass and something like Rockfin can take over, although I don't have much hope when Cuomo brings Eric Schmidt, the Google founder, in via video conference today to build New York. Then I bring up my boy Dylan Avery's about to release a doc. The driving force behind Loose Change is about to release 7 on WTC 7 within weeks. So I hope it can go viral, fingers crossed. But again, Loose Change was allowed to go viral. They didn't pull it. Instead, it got in 20 different languages within 2 months, and it was able to sit with people. And this is what Ben says back. He goes, yeah, I saw PLANdemic today, and it was taken down fast. I go, exactly, scary fast. And he goes, thinking the same thing that will happen with 7. And it might. And that's sad, because Dylan's documentary is what? It is based on a paper by academics and physicists and scientists out of Alaska Fairbanks. Now, I fully expect the same thing to happen if this dares go viral and brings up the case of 9/11 again, that they'll just pull it. It doesn't matter that the academic paper has been published. It doesn't matter that these are, career physicists. It doesn't matter at all anymore. And that's what's so frightening, is that they've now changed the narrative after building their empires on the backs of documentaries like Loose Change, on the backs of people like Alex Jones that help people bring into that platform because you couldn't find them on television, right? And all these independent creators, long before the box openers and the toy reviewers and the bullshit fucking cooking channels. Yeah, that's great. One of my friends has one of the biggest cooking channels on YouTube. He's employed by YouTube. You know what I'm saying? They actually 2+ million, that they're like television, but they're allowed and I'm not. And I'm not, and I helped build that platform before you could put up a 10-minute video. Why? Why are we allowing that? And that's the thing. A lot of people want to say, well, they're a private company. They're a private company, Jason. And I'm not even saying public utility, right? But to call YouTube a private company, I'm going to say something that's, not allowed to be said in 2020. I'm going to say it anyway. You're fucking retarded. You are fucking retarded to believe that YouTube is a private company. Let me give you an example. And I actually told this example to them. I go, when you have YouTube's parent company being Google, and Google has been in bed with NASA, Goldman Sachs, Bezos, and Amazon now for over a decade on quantum computing, that is a pseudo-government agency. That has nothing to do with private business and pure capitalism and fair trade. That is not what that is. That is a protected technopoly. That's what that is. Just like Bezos and Amazon are who we went to in this PLANdemic, right? To help us with everything. Why not? Bezos already owns, the Washington paper that's huge. Okay, Bezos already owns the rights to the National Security Agency's data centers. These are not private companies. When you start taking private companies and they're doing business with high-level alphabet agencies within the government, you have outward digital fascism. And to say that they are a private company in any way, shape, or form is laughable to me.
Yeah, it is a huge issue because unfortunately, I think people they want a alternative. The problem is none of these alternatives, and I've explored all of them, I'm sure much like yourself, are that good. Like they're all like not as user friendly. They don't have easy apps that work with Chromecast and stuff like that. It's like they're not. So there is something to that. The one thing I'll say the same thing to you that I said to Titus Frost when he was on not too long ago. You guys should really think about just putting the audio version of your YouTube shows on a RSS feed, on a podcast, so that because there seems to be less. I had restrictions recently on iTunes with the Del Bigtree interview I did recently, but that's common with Del Bigtree of late, where anybody who has them on, they have some iTunes issues. Coincidentally, right? I contact them. They're like, "Oh, we just had an issue with the feed or whatever. It's fixed now." But it's only 48 hours later. But my point is like on Spotify and all this other stuff, and I'll say I use Podomatic, and they are really good with like they'll never sell your information. They believe in no censorship whatsoever, and so far so good. I've been with them for 6 years, and they just came out with this. I didn't read all of it, but I briefed through it. They threw out this email called like the podcast Bill of Rights, and they talked about, like, you have your right to put out whatever you believe, no censorship, we'll never sell your stuff, we'll never sell any of your information to any advertisers or anything, whatever. And it seems like podcasts are the one place where you're not seeing as much censorship. So putting it out as a audio format, especially some of the longer interviews you do or in conversations you do, people can listen to it on a commute or whatnot. It might not be a bad idea. Have you thought about that?
So what I've been trying to do for quite some time now, like I've been reaching out to people, and obviously my days may be numbered. First of all, I'm triple streaming at this point. I'm also streaming to Twitch on top of Periscope, on top of YouTube, right, when I am going live. I was doing Rockfin, but I've been doing uploads on Rockfin, and then if I do go live on Rockfin, it's usually exclusive. I really do like that platform, and I think that has a really good chance to one day rival some of these, but it's taking it slow and it's doing it very, very smartly. I'll get into that in a second. But what I've been trying to do, and I've discussed this recently on my show, I wanted to be on a talk radio. Anybody that would give me a job, AM or FM, okay? You don't even really have to pay me. All you have to do, is allow me, if I want to sell advertising like you would on the thing and get some there, like literally no salary. So what do I need them for? Well, number one, let's say that we did a 2-hour show with commercials, right? We could block that out into 4 15-minute segments, 12 minutes on air, 3 minutes off. That would also give me a producer to answer phones for me to put them in the queue so I can easily go to phone calls and it's not clunky. It flows like a real show as it needs to do. When I do that through Hangouts, I'll be in the middle of a conversation and then it starts ringing and then they gotta turn their thing off. It's a nightmare, right? You do it through that way. All right. So now by the end of the day, I'm also simulcasting via video on each segment. I have 8 videos done. If I start at 10 a.m. by noon, I've got 8 videos on YouTube on whatever subjects they are. They're out there. Then you have the radio audience. Okay. Number 2, I'm clean. There's no way I can curse if I'm on those radio broadcasts on top of that. Then afterwards, you take out all the advertising and then you rebrand it as a podcast, and maybe someone sponsors that podcast at the beginning, middle, and end, and you can put it in there. All of which could be done and uploaded if I had a 10 to 12 program by 1 p.m. All right. And that would triple broadcast. The problem with that is everyone I've talked about goes, that's great for you, Jason. That's wonderful for you. He goes, but no matter what kind of ad revenue you can get me, I still have to worry about government censorship or outright other advertisers who don't like you dropping from other shows. And we're syndicating from Clear Channel and, the Limbaughs of the world, the Hannitys, the O'Reillys, et cetera. That's who they're in business with. They're already in business with the establishment. So for me, I totally agree. And by the way, there is one podcast that goes out a week. TheGruelingTruth.com carries my podcast, Mixed Martial Mindset, with John Fitch. It's released the day after we do it. And that's because I know that's always going to be about an hour format. You know what I mean? So, and they reached out. And the other thing is I like about that is, okay, they're a sports site. I'm taking, my stuff, and yeah, we're talking sports. We're talking a lot more, and that's reaching another audience. The same reason I'd want to be on AM and FM radio. I want that other audience. I want as many audiences as possible. The thing is, I'm one guy, and I'm trying to pump out 3 to 7 videos a day. Now, I was doing that pretty well before the coronavirus thing. When the coronavirus thing hit, instead of these 3 to 7 videos a day where maybe I had one that was 20, 30 minutes, or maybe I had one that was an hour if it was an interview or something like that, I started going for 30, 60, sometimes 90 minutes a day and then only putting out 2 videos, because it's just stressful for me. I'm watching the Trump press conference, for an hour and a half, 2 hours. I'm watching the full Cuomo press conference. When it first started, I'm watching the full de Blasio press conference. I'm battling the keyboard warriors. Excuse me. I'm looking at the videos that they're sending me so I can put my own context on it. That takes a lot of time. I kind of pride myself in trying not to run my mouth too hard until I've actually looked at the issues. So I do have some good news. I did a phone call with a couple of guys that have a decent sized website and following in alternative media. They pitched me on the idea of my own website, which people have been pushing me into all over. And what we're going to do there that's very different is, although we're going to embed the live streams via YouTube, as long as they don't cut me off or whatever, we'll do it from another platform if we have to. since they've taken super chats away, what we're going to do is the idea of a video message board. So instead of just asking me a question, basically we're going to use my GoFundMe as a mechanism. If you donate $5, that's going to give you the opportunity to upload a 15-second video asking me a question via Dropbox. And then at the end of the week, let's see how big it gets. But at the end of the week, that's my Ask Me Anything. So I'll play your video, and then I will answer your question. So for $5, it'll be a 15-minute segment. You want us to pay $10, you can do 30. And then for $20, you'll get the full 60 seconds, 1 minute. Go for it. Tell me what you want. This also allows me to make sure that, if I'm going to have somebody random live video, they're not just going to pull their dick out or do something crazy, right? And it'll let me interact with my audience, and people can go through the message board of the questions that are already there and check them out and make sure they're not double asking. And I haven't seen that, right? I haven't seen that anywhere. So that'll be something that's very cool, and I'm looking to expand. Like I said, when YouTube fully demonetized me, I put the call out. I said, hey, will anybody in mainstream or alternative media touch me? Everybody's, has this elevated view of InfoWars, right? But the fact of the matter, everybody asked me, well, why didn't you go back to InfoWars? If anybody saw my confrontation with Alex Jones from DC, I had talked to him one time, while we did the Sandusky interview where I was trying to expose the pedophile ring out of Penn State that's still been covered up to this day. I did say to Alex, I go, I want back in, right? And I, obviously wanted to do reports from New York, but just from his reaction and whatever, I never pursued it beyond that. Because listen, I'm not going to beg for something, right? But he acted like I begged for my job back. Like, you see, that's Alex's spin. He jumped into the conversation. I wasn't even in. I remember that time you begged for your job back. I do remember the time that we were sitting across a video conference and I said I wanted back in. I didn't tell you I wanted to go back to Texas and have the Info Warrior show. I'd already done. And the other thing is, like, I'd already done like 3 or 4 reports free. Like, am I supposed to fucking work for free? And, so many people have worked for him for free. So that's the other thing. And then if I bring that up, I'm a hater. You're just trying to destroy Alex Jones. No, I'm trying to make him accountable and make people understand that even the alternative media can be very, very backstabby. You know what I'm saying? And
I've heard
that's not to say I think Alex Jones should be censored. Every time they've tried to censor that guy, I've had his fucking back, whether I agree or disagree with him. But at the same time, I'm not going to buy into his Sandy Hook bullshit. I'll expose it. And it's just like while he was sitting there jamming at me with his new wife going, you begged, you got on your knees. What did I do? Hey, let's talk about Assange. Let's get him on the record about Assange. This is important. Isn't the extradition of Assange the most important issue right now in free speech? What did I do? I forced him to answer the question. And then he was doing that National File event with Patrick Howley, Gavin McInnes, Nick Fuentes was there, Michael Flynn Jr., Millie Weaver, Owen Schroyer, all these names, right? What did he lead it with? Assange. And how that is a big issue. Do you think he would have led that press conference with Assange if I hadn't put his feet to the fire? Fuck no, he would not have. It was going to be all about Roger Stone. It was. And that's just a fact. And people can tell me I'm full of shit or not. I know how things work, guys. And that's why it's important for no matter how little you are to get that camera in someone's face. Because look, at this point, Alex Jones is bigger than O'Reilly ever was, right? O'Reilly used to be huge, post 9/11. Jones is way bigger. And that's why I said to him, I go, look, man, if I were as big as you, you'd put my feet to the fire too. So let's answer the question. Who cares whatever personal nonsense we have between each other? That's not the point. And one of the things I said, on my walk and talk when I was so upset that they got rid of Ike is that's what we need to do. We need to approach these people, the Eric Schmidts of the world, the Cuomos of the world, the people that are making decisions now, ask hard questions on video, the Susan Wojciechowskis of the world, right? Get them on the record, use their platform to go viral, and then make them censor us, because they will. Because they will. And it's once they censor us, for instance, PLANdemic, hey, big day for BitChute. That thing yesterday on just one of them I saw had 40,000 plus hits. That's pretty good for BitChute. You know what I'm saying? So I just feel like if we went back to that We Are Change model, which I give Luke Rudowski and others, full credit for, right? Even student scholars for 9/11 Truth. I just had Justin Martell on. He and the Jackman brothers used to do that a lot. We saw it all across the country. If we got into that idea, and by the way, about 1,000% more people actually have this device in their pocket now, whereas you actually had to have a handy cam before and really put it to somebody. But they've just been turned so docile. That's not hip or trendy. They want a gotcha moment with some leftist with a pussy hat or some right winger who has a rebel flag. You know, that'll go viral. But dare you fucking put Henry Kissinger's feet to the fire on how this coronavirus should be used for global government, or do that to Tony Blair or Gordon Brown. That's not allowed anymore. And we have to make it really clear that that's what we're going to be doing. So, you know, I'm hoping that activism is about to make a big comeback with this thing.
Yeah, but the alternative media going at each other, it is a huge issue. I mean, it's been a huge issue for a while. I mean, me and Titus Frost talked about it. You know, Titus and I discussed quite a few people who, you know, into alternative media that kind of go at each other, and it doesn't do anybody any good, because everybody should have the right to state their opinions. There's plenty of people that I'm sure disagree with me, plenty of people who I disagree with, that I still will promote and love their work. I mean, I don't have to agree with everybody on everything. And there's times where I disagree with somebody, and then in time I end up agreeing with them. I realize that I was wrong, or, you know, so that happens too. So doing this tribalism and going at each other, it doesn't help at all. And, you know, it is funny because this whole vaccine agenda, because it definitely seems like the bill, you know, it's funny because like just a couple of years ago, if you're talking about Bill Gates and this bigger agenda of him controlling health and all these influence on all these organizations, it sounded like a conspiracy theory. It sounded like, no, not the Microsoft guy. He's such a good dude. Like he seems, you know, just harmless. And now a lot of people are having doubts on vaccines, or at least questioning some of it. They're questioning some of the science behind it. They're questioning some of the people who are pushing it. And so I think, but, you know, this is similar to the Epstein thing, right? Because I remember after the Epstein thing, I had similar thoughts to like 9/11, where just like, oh, this is going to be the red pill for so many people. People are going to be like, holy shit, if this is possible, then what the hell isn't possible? If Epstein linked to all these top-ranked, most powerful people in Hollywood, in politics, in business, all these, I mean, linked to, you know, Bill Gates, of all these, if this guy who is a registered sex offender, human trafficker, if this guy, you know, linked to Mossad and intelligence, all this stuff, if this guy, you know, if this story could be true, then what the fuck can't be true? But now people are like, just in no time, the same people who would call that a conspiracy theory not too long ago are calling anybody who's questioning the mainstream narrative now a conspiracy theorist. It's like, wait, is this a conspiracy theory because this seems like a hard pill to swallow? Does this seem like you know, this idea that they're pushing a vaccine agenda, or they would lie to the public, does that seem too hard to believe? Because before the Epstein story became mainstream news, guess what? If I try to explain that to you, that would be a even harder pill to swallow. I mean, think about it. I mean, try people that you like, people you see on TV, people who are constantly in the news and on daytime TV and morning shows, those people hang out with a pedophile and are friends and have been to his island and all this stuff. That would sound hard to believe. So the fact that like these people, I mean, that people have like such short-term or awful long-term memory, where just like stories come out that seem so hard to believe in the next. I mean, look at the Penn State stuff, like you said, the Penn State story. You know, when there was a attorney, right? Wasn't it a district attorney who like vanished, that who was trying to, who possibly was linked to exposing it, right? Just vanished.
Just vanished. Yep, absolutely. And the other thing about that is, you know, let's talk about that, because the Bill Gates thing. You know, I have Bill Gates in my film Shade the Motion Picture from 2013 in the regards of what? Population control, weather manipulation, everything outside of Microsoft. I make that extremely clear. I even play the Super Best Friends news clip of he, Bloomberg, Soros, Turner, Oprah, and they're going to save the world. And the funny thing is, you know, James Corbett hit me up this week asking me if I still had that clip. And I'm like, oh, I've still got my whole film shade on a hard drive. Let me just go check it out. And I remember it was a small clip, so I just, I did MP4 and I just looked through the ones that were 1 to 10 megabytes, found it, had it for him in 5 minutes. And somehow, again, like to go back to the alternative media fighting each other, people were trying to pit James Corbett and I against each other because we differed on the opinion of what the coronavirus was or how many people it was killing. And they're like, oh, Corbett's going to put you in your place. And then even after we did an hour-long discussion, there were those that were just like, he owns you, Burmes. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. We had a really good conversation, and we both admitted that, the numbers could obviously be skewed. And the only way that we're really going to be able to tell one way or the other is when we look at the death rate in New York annually, right? So if we can look and see that 155,000 in 2017, 153,000 in 2016, 154,000 in 2016, right? And we see those numbers progress in 18 and 19 when they come out. And then by the time the 2020 comes out, and that's going to be maybe 3 years from now, and all of a sudden it does say, well, we did have 175,000 deaths. Now, maybe they're going to say 40,000 deaths in New York from coronavirus. But then you look at those numbers and you could say, yeah, they were inflated, but obviously 20,000 more people died that year. So something was going on. But it's not until we get those data points that we're going to be able to really get a consensus. So people love the battle, dude. They want to see their favorites go at it. They love to see people torn down. And then you do have the people that are just set in there to cause chaos, that they have either one, they are some type of an operative, or number two, they are riding the wave of clicks and they are mentally dangerous. I took issue with the film your hospital thing when people were outside of a hospital and it wasn't like there were people dying outside. I'm like, no shit. And then they would go into the lobby and it would be empty. And I'd be like, yeah, that's not the ICU. No shit. These 2.5 minute videos, I was contacted by one of these people, called me while I was in the shower. Okay. And this is a guy that promoted Q. I don't want to give him too much attention because I'm not doing it. He was a big Q promoter, had Corsi on a couple weeks ago, somebody who has peddled in bullshit. And I've kept away. And I made the mistake of, saying, you can believe me and my nurse source in Stony Brook, my nurse source in Queens, my medical professional in Brooklyn, two of which I worked side by side with for years. I know their character, had drinks with, like people I know. And that really bothers me, that comes into question because I've only been honest my entire career, worn my heart on my sleeve, but calls me while I'm in the shower. I got this thing pumping, my audio's pumping through my little Bluetooth speaker, right? It's like 10:30 in the morning. I don't know who it is at first. And then they say, you don't recognize my voice. Like, I know who the fuck this person really is, And then they tell me that they're demanding an apology. They record it. They put up a thumbnail of me in a shower. They call me a liar and a social engineer. Gets further than that, my friend. Then they tell their audience that I took out a fake Craigslist ad against them for something. I don't get me to know how this works. I guess they must have clicked on it and they said that, that's wire fraud. And then I planned a DDoS attack against the person's Skype. I mean, they tried to call me several times. I ignored it, right? I get called from another number from the UK. I answer that one. The first thing out of this person's mouth is something about a Craigslist ad. I immediately hang up. Okay. A third number starts calling me and then texts me and telling me that I've committed wire fraud with this imaginary Craigslist ad. Never, ever have I ever sicked my audience on anybody, especially in the alternative media. That's never, ever happened, right? And I still would never do that because I think that's insanity. I don't dox people. Then I literally say, I go, listen, you are mentally ill. Do not contact me again. I will be going to the police to file a restraining order against you, which I fully intended on doing because this person's mentally insane. I'm worried they're going to show up to my house with my nieces downstairs and my sister. I walk around my town. I'm very open about where I live. So while I'm interviewing Dr. Shiva, this is going down. The person is trolling in my live chat and an unknown number calls me 6 times. I have to shut my phone off. I then do have to go to the police and put this on the record, because God forbid this dude showed up to my house and I physically assault him for doing so on my porch. I might be the one to get in trouble. That's insanity to me, man. You know, just to get into that kind of a, you know, rough and tumble with somebody. And this is a guy that is in legal battles with other people in the alternative media. I'm not looking for any legal battles. I'm just trying to protect my family. And that's another thing. When you see these people that are constantly in legal battles, that have all these secret sources that are telling you they're under attack constantly, that's another good one, right? They're always under attack. Their information's, there's always these internet bullshit. I've never said that about any of my work, ever, because it's not real. You know, it's not real when somebody tells you they have a source that's saying they're rescuing underground children in the middle of Central Park under tents. Any person that has walked through Central Park ever in their lives would be like, oh, you're an insane person, because that's not possible. That's not how. Have you been to Central Park? I would assume you have, Ricky, right? Yeah. Can you imagine Central Park, which is, listen, you're going down a main drag of New York City where there are huge buildings, and then on the side you got a bunch of vendors, and you got a bunch of like horse and buggy, you know, touristy stuff, and then you walk through, and then whoa, holy shit, I'm in a park. Like it's very bizarre for New York, right? It's this area, it's constantly full, there's rocks. It's just not plausible. It's by the coast. It's just not plausible that they're rescuing children from some kind of underground pedophile ring in New York City. It's like there's enough real stuff in the Epstein case that should blow your mind. There's enough real stuff in those Finders documents that they were released. There was enough real stuff on the Finders before that Derek Bros did an excellent job of surmising. There's enough real stuff in the Franklin scandal to show you how corrupt the FBI is. All these documents in these cases with high-level pedophiles are available if you look. You look at the FBI document that came out this year that labels Lord Mountbatten, the uncle and mentor to Prince Charles, as a serial pedophile who's into young boys, who's named Lord Mountbatten by his friends. That's never really been addressed in the mainstream. The royal family seems to be above reproach. Did the FBI expose him? No. Instead, later on, this guy goes and works for NATO. You know, they empower these people, right? And that's what we have to focus on, is people like Jimmy Savile, who they knew for years, was not prosecuted. He was promoted. He was elevated. Let's stick with the facts. Let's stick to what we can prove. Let's try to flesh those facts out. And let's not believe in the fantastic, because the other thing that's the common thread in all these hopium conspiracy theories is that there are people, Ricky, on the inside that want to do so much good that they're going to take over the deep state. And yeah, there's good people inside, but the good people never get promoted to the level of Pompeo or Barr or Mattis or Gina Haspel. They're there to repress and suppress the information of those that would try to come out against the establishment. That's why that arrest of Epstein wasn't the FBI. Maria Farmer went there in 96. In 96, I just interviewed her yesterday. Stunning interview. I felt so privileged to do that. But to show that the cover-up crew was in full effect all the way from 96 through Palm Beach, and then up to his arrest, to the point that the FBI still didn't arrest him, and it was beat cops in New York State, the NYPD, that put that indictment together, and even they couldn't keep him from not killing himself twice. You know, that should show you the power structure, man. When the first suicide in 13 or 14 years in MCC isn't recorded twice, what do you think's going on?
Yeah, and you started off by talking about that James Corbett interview you did. I actually shared that interview, that discussion, with a lot of people, and I sent it to a lot of people because I wanted people to see what a honest conversation with two people who don't necessarily, you know, agree on every single specific detail, but how you can have a honest discussion about it. And at the end of the day, I think most of the big picture, I think, is agreed upon, you know, and I think that's important. It's like, so there's certain details we might agree, disagree on, or whatever, but I think we're all fighting for the same thing. And we all, we do, like you said, you talked about Bill Gates in your documentary, years ago. So it's not like you guys disagree on a lot of this stuff. And I think it gets harder and harder to do that type of stuff. I mean, James Corbett is somebody who's great at it. He's great at having discussions with people he disagrees with, and he's very open to that. And I've had him on my show. I remember him and Hunter Motz, who used to have a show with Brian Callen. I think they're still doing it, Mixed Mental Arts. But they were on and they talked about the education and schooling and homeschooling and all that stuff and the history of education. And he was more than open to have that discussion. I've had people like Adam Kokesh on debating with Hunter Motz on my show, and it's fun when you can get two people who are willing to be pretty honest and just be like, okay, if somebody makes a point, I'm willing to acknowledge it was a good point. I mean, unfortunately, most of the time, people are just defending their team or defending their opinion, and they don't. It's one of the most frustrating things when I talk to people and they just completely bypass any point I make and just go to their point. And I'm just like, okay, I'll acknowledge if you make a point. I want you to acknowledge my point. But it's like you're not, and then you realize like, oh, you're not in the discussion to learn anything. You're not attempting to learn anything. You're not attempting to actually look at this with an open mind. You're just attempting to win. You're just attempting to be right. You're attempting to defend your team and feel like you were right and you made your points. And it's like, that's not my goal. I'm not here to try to be smarter than anybody or be right or make any or disprove anybody. I'm just here to seek information and try to gather as much information as I can, try to look at things with an open mind, and that's it. And wherever that road takes me, I'm willing to go. So I think that's something you've been doing very well for a long time. And I think people like yourself, people like James Corbett, my show. I mean, I think there's a lot of great shows out there that, that they do. They are willing to just go down any rabbit hole and go down any road, regardless if it goes against maybe what they believe initially. And they seem sincere. And to me, like my big thing is always when people question other people's intentions because they disagree with them, that is bothersome to me. Like the fact that somebody might say, that person is a shill, they're trying to push disinformation because you disagree with them. It's like, no, guess what? Somebody could honestly, in their heart, truly want to put out information because they think it's important information, it can help people or whatnot, and still be wrong. Like it could be just wrong information, or that's that happens. It's so to say that their intentions are this, or sometimes people are like, oh, that documentary filmmaker's biased, or that it's like, yeah, but I mean, if you believe in what you're saying, you're going to be a little biased because I wouldn't be promoting something I don't believe in, so it's like we're all a little biased in our ideas. But, the idea that like somebody can't put out information that is maybe you disagree with and they can put it out, but still be sincere, like they just unknowingly put it out, put out bad information or wrong information. Or I mean, we've all, I'm sure at some point retweeted some article that happened to be wrong or discredited or whatnot.
Well, let's talk about Corbett's interview, right? He acknowledged that a lot of people had been sharing that diagram that seemed to show that flu had just dropped off the face of the earth, right? And then he said, what you've pointed out is that especially with the flu information from as far back as 2014, that trails. So it always starts on that dip and then it comes back up as things are being reported. And he said, look, a lot of well-meaning people shared that thinking that they were correct, not doing the background check of, oh, okay, so in 2 months, this is going to get updated. Oh, I see how this works now. And then some people were just so dedicated to it, like you said, they couldn't possibly fathom that they had been wrong and won't admit being wrong. I'm the first guy that's going to admit being wrong because, look, I don't need the bravado. I'm not here to be a personality. I'm not telling you that I'm always going to be right. Especially with the on the ground stuff, it's not about right or left. It's about people. And especially with my cousin. So I got news from my cousin. If you listen to the Corbett interview, I've been telling people my cousin, a year younger than me, probably in better shape than me, never been sick. In the beginning of the March, she gets very, very ill. Okay. She's worried about this because she is in downstate New York, down in Hyde Park. This is Dutchess County, pretty close to the city, 45 minutes where I grew up till I was like 12. So it didn't shock me. I was worried about her. She tries 3 times to get the test, right? By the third time she gets her first test there, she tests negative. She still is as sick as she's ever been. They tell her she has pneumonia for the first time in her life. Okay. Again, no comorbidities, never had any history of any of this stuff, not on the medications, etc. Then they set up their Bear Mountain testing facility, one of these makeshift testing facilities. Now, for most, this was a facility where you contacted them and then you made an appointment and you drove up and you got the swab test. This is, by the way, the swab test on each one of her tests, because she gets told she's negative on that first test, right? Totally negative. She can't believe it, but whatever. They call her back. They want her to test. She feels fine now. Okay. They do the swab brain test again. That shit is crazy to me. They get back to her from a Saturday to Thursday. And by the way, when she was up there, she took a picture because she goes, look, I had no internet, and they jammed the AM and FM signals. There was no radio either. You know, you got a military operation running. They contact her on the following Thursday saying she's currently positive. Again, now she's completely asymptomatic. She's supposedly just a carrier. It takes several days for her to get the CDC paperwork and the fact that she has to quarantine herself for another 14 days. So just last week, she goes in to Vassar Hospital to test for the antibodies. You know, and I'm just trying to explain the process for people that are actually going through this. She gets tested for antibodies. Now, you would think that there's no doubt that she's going to test positive for antibodies even if one of those tests was wrong, right? Appears she was sick from it before. Maybe she had it. She got it back today, tested negative for the antibodies. All right. So now they're telling her that she may have tested negative for the antibodies because they did the test too soon after she had the virus, or she may still be a carrier for the virus despite being out of the quarantine now for over a week. I mean, this is just madness. This is the process people are going through. It should also let people know that, you know, even these establishment tests, they don't know what the fuck's going on. Like, how is that possible? You know, I thought 14 days after, and obviously it seems like more than 14 days after, because you tested her about 2 weeks after she was sick anyway. A month after, she could still be a carrier? What is this thing? Why is it so asymptomatic? You know, for me, those are the questions that we need to be asking so we can address what this thing really is, and we can address treatments for everybody to really minimize the body count on this, minimize the fear. And I'm not talking about vaccines. I'm talking about, do they want the hydroxychloroquine? Do they want the intravenous vitamin C treatments and the steroids? One of the things that's completely off the table, that's in the mainstream as an authoritative source that can treat this, is mesenchymal stem cells. But because stem cell therapy isn't used in the United States because it works and it's not patentable, okay, we don't even discuss that. These are problems. These are the issues that we need to take hold, because even outside of the coronavirus, we're setting up a very bad precedent for another, possibly more dangerous, invisible enemy to come up, that hydroxychloroquine doesn't work or vitamin C doesn't work, and it's only going to be the shot. And if you don't fall in line, yes, you are going to be arrested. This is insanity. And again, I think we have to deal with the facts. I think that we have to be very careful of, even with the biological warfare angle being framed as a United States versus China, a capitalism versus communism thing, because I've said this from day one. I don't think this is a nation state operation. I really don't. I think we're well beyond that. I think this is a predator class op. And I think a lot of these things have been predator class ops with people on the inside. You look at 9/11, and damn, do I try to drill it down. I don't think it was an inside job. I think it was an international intelligence operation with role players where? The United States, obviously, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and then you look at Pakistan in particular, and now we have even more evidence of their involvement in 9/11 and protection just the past couple weeks. What do I mean? They let Omar Saeed Sheikh out of prison, who was convicted of a death sentence for orchestrating the kidnapping of Daniel Pearl, who was the first beheading video. This man was supposed to be executed. What does that have to do with 9/11 in Pakistan? Well, he is the man that took the wire transfer from General Mahmoud Ahmed, the head of the Pakistani ISI, the man Joe Biden called the most powerful person, or maybe the second most powerful person in the country days after 9/11. The man that was meeting with Porter Goss, who would become the head of the CIA, and Bob Graham on the morning of 9/11. The man that was also meeting with George Tenet and Condoleezza Rice that week, who wired $100,000 to Atta. Well, who facilitated that payment? Omar Saeed Sheikh, the facilitator of a $100,000 wire transfer to Muhammad Atta, never brought up that he was involved in 9/11, that Pakistan was involved in 9/11, that in January of 2002, Dan Rather and CBS News did an expose that bin Laden was being protected by the Pakistani military in a hospital on the eve of 9/11. And then they find bin Laden, supposedly, if you go with the narrative, where? In Pakistan. Pakistan has never been a target of the war on terror, and the people that facilitated their role have never been punished. They, in fact, have actually been rewarded. And that is the case with Omar Saeed Sheikh. And where is that in the mainstream media? It's fucking crickets. Because what does it do? It also shows that Joe Biden helped cover up their role in 9/11 as well. And I mean, that alone should disqualify him from being the nominee. The multitude of photos of him, not photos, videos of him manhandling children should stop him. I've been posting that video, which nobody seems to remember, showing what a pig the guy was at the 2007 debates when he's standing in between Bill Richardson, accused pedophile, by the way, in the Epstein case, former New Mexico governor, and Dennis Kucinich, and everybody's supposed to say something really nice about the person to the left of him, and it gets to Biden when he's really in his full Joey B gangster mode, when he's still got his brains and a little bit more of his fake hair plugs, and he says, I think this is a ridiculous exercise. I've known Dennis for years, and you know what I like best about him? His wife. And everybody laughs about Joe Biden commenting on Dennis Kucinich's hot wife when Dennis Kucinich was one of the last real anti-war Democrats out there, and somebody that I admire to some extent because he dared talk about 9/11 and World Trade Center Building 7 when no one else would.
And it shows that people can come together, because him and Ron Paul worked together many times. And the censorship, here's just an example of people have to ask the question, the protests. You brought up the protests earlier in the conversation. Why are those videos being suppressed? Who are you protecting? These are videos of things that are really happening. Who are you protecting? You look at the creepy Joe Biden videos. There's videos that are just clips of all these creepy things that, I had some friends over the house the other day, and yes, I don't care about having people over the house. You can public shame me. That it's fine. I don't care. And so I had people over the house the other day, and, we're talking about these clips, and I'm like, I bet you they're hard to find now. And they couldn't find them. So I went online, and I'm searching, and I'm like, where the fuck are these videos? These weren't that hard to find. And you can't remove them by saying that it's putting out false information. They're literally just clips of things that really happened. You're just taking clips that really happened. Nobody tampered with it. Nobody changed things that make them look creepier than they really are. And one of my buddies that were over the house, the first couple clips, they're like, yeah, that seems a little weird. And then as it kept going, and he's like, holy crap, there's a whole lot of these. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay, now this is starting to get creepy. And you see one or two. Yeah, maybe it's coincidental. Maybe it's blown out of proportion. You don't know if he has a friendly relationship with these people or whatnot. But when you're seeing over and over again this is what he's doing on camera. What type of creepy shit is going on when the camera's off? When he's loosey-goosey being himself. So it's just, you can't ignore the fact that, when you're suppressing information, you can't justify the fact that it seems like it's always information that goes against the grain or goes against the establishment. And it's just, you have to ask that question, who are they protecting by suppressing this stuff? And everybody should have the right to all the information. If I want to watch a 2-hour video on reptilians, on the flat earth, I should be able to. And as intelligent human beings, I should have the right to either believe it or not believe it. I mean, some people can I mean, there's atheists that truly believing in Jesus or a God or whatever, or is equally as ridiculous as believing in a flat Earth or reptilians. So why don't we go around saying, well, you know what? These religious videos that are convincing people of supernatural spirituality, these should be removed. Like, you could make that argument. You could, right? Well, why can't we say that? Like, you shouldn't be promoting any religious views or saying that this holy book was written by in the spirit of God or whatever, because that is also, you can't prove or disprove it. So why aren't those things being suppressed? So it's like, my point is, like, the religious people, the non-religious people, whoever it is, like, everybody's all for censorship until it happens to them, until they become a victim of it. And that's why you don't let somebody decide what should be censored and what shouldn't be, and let it all out there. I mean, if you want to be a Holocaust denier, if you want to be a flat earth, whatever it is, like, put the information out there, and the majority of people will watch it, and they can decide, okay, is this, and it's different if you're talking about people who are promoting violence or promoting, that type of stuff. I get it. But if you're just promoting a opinion or a perspective or a theory, there's nothing wrong with that. And people should, like I said, people should be defending people's rights to do that, because eventually you will be a victim of censorship.
100%. And that's the whole thing. That's what I said about Ike. I go, look, I don't have to agree with everything that David Icke has to say. I don't have to, oh, he's the guy that promoted the lizard theory. Okay. He's also the guy that helped expose the royal family and their connections to pedophilia. Let's not get that twisted, and you're allowed to have an opinion. And I said, look, somebody uses bad speech, has a bad opinion, is telling you something that's wrong. What do you need? You need better speech, you need better evidence, you need better facts, you need better eyewitnesses, you need better documents, and you need a better way to articulate them. If they're not going to give you the opportunity to articulate a counter narrative, that's where the problem begins. And you see what is pushed in the mainstream, whether it be on these platforms or even on cable now. And what is a lot of it? It is the new spirituality of ancient aliens and the supernatural being real. What are the biggest shows on the History Channel? It's not only Ancient Aliens. They took Project Blue Book, a real government operation that set out to debunk a lot of these UFO sightings that, in my opinion, the vast majority were, government tests of certain aircraft and other types of phenomenon. So again, they use that, and then now it's a series of, like, literally taken from the X-Files. Like, it's literally a series that is as real as the X-Files was, based on an actual project, Project Blue Book. Terribly popular. Oh, they're going to Skinwalker Ranch. Skinwalker Ranch being promoted. Oh, there's something underground, but we can't dig there. Oh, there's a light beam. Where's it coming from? Probably your fucking producer 20 miles up, but I'll never know. Because all of this stuff has been blurred. The Curse of Oak Island, I think that those guys are genuine, but at the same time, it's always sensationalized as, oh, is this little piece of metal from 1200 years ago? And they just parade you along and along and along with no substance. The To the Stars Academy shit with Tom DeLonge, that guy's always got a new intel drop and talks all serious to Tom DeLonge. Hey, motherfucker, you don't work for the government anymore. That's not how people talk, and you're full of shit. How about that? I debate him in a heartbeat, and I think DeLonge's heart is really in it. And then the media comes along, and they promote that by saying they've got 3 new videos of UFOs that have already been disclosed 3 years ago. They're just acknowledging that they're real and that they came from these ships, not that they're aliens, et cetera, et cetera. But people buy into it. So, those type of narratives are okay, but narratives that challenge the system, whether it be the medical establishment, the media establishment, the government establishment, and really even the entertainment establishment, those are the ones that they've pushed us into this box of, we'll censor you, we'll cut you off. And those of us who have been lucky enough to make a business out of YouTube, some of us don't have the scruples Some of us are willing to like take videos down and say certain things or morph yourself from an alternative media pundit into a conservative pundit. And I'm not. I'll never be that guy. You know, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm not going to wear a letter on my chest or an animal or wave some kind of flag and say this is about Americana. No, it's not. It's about the fucking truth, dude. And I hate to tell you, but Americana was built on a lie. You know, we talked about the false don't drink the Kool-Aid. The other big one is don't be a lemming. Well, that's also false. Just so everybody understands how that myth that lemmings run off a cliff started, it was the good people of Walt Disney. Okay, Walt Disney did these wild documentaries. You can go look it up. It's 100% factual. And in order to make it look like these lemmings were jumping off a cliff, they positioned a camera on the underside of a fall, and then they had the producer push them off the cliff. Push them off the cliff. And today, 70 years later, that terminology is used on a daily basis with no critical thought process whatsoever. That should let people know how the controllers even control the alternative narrative in some points. So, man, we live in very strange times. They are only going to get stranger, and I can only hope that people are willing to push back full throttle in a way they never have before, because if we don't, we will become a Chinese-style authoritarian government that is ruled by outward bureaucrats, not only the predator class from behind the scenes, but the Faucis, the Gates, the Schmidts of the world, and that is frightening.
Yeah, I mean that's like the Spanish flu coming from Spain. Like that's not accurate at all. People been saying that forever, and it's just like they just called it the Spanish flu, and I think other countries called it different things like the French flu or whatever, counting on where they thought it originated. But yeah, I mean a lie can be told over and over again. I mean I just had Gerard Williams on. He's been on twice. First time he was on was years ago. He was on like episode 35, and he wrote the book Grey Wolf: The Escape of Adolf Hitler. Remember when I had him on, a lot of World War II buffs that were friends of mine were like, that can't be, you know, that like how, you know, and now it's become a mainstream narrative. Why? Because he was on Hunting Hitler, he was on the History Channel, and because the History Channel is on board and all these mainstream people are on board, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, now it's a narrative it's acceptable, and that's bullshit. I mean, it's, you know, I told Gerard, I mean, the Hitler story is in a way relevant because it shows how a lie can be told over and over again, and everybody can buy in, everybody can believe it, and when you look into it, you realize that there's zero evidence of this lie being true, but yet everybody, you assume, like there's this assumption that if everybody is saying the same thing and believing the same thing, there must be some truth to it. Somebody must have looked into it, right? I mean, you just assume this many people believe this. Somebody must have looked into it. There must be, and even that was a lie. So, you know, you see stories like this over and over again. I had Jim. I'll tell you one last story before I let you go, because I know I've been holding you up for a while, and you need to put out your 7 to 100 videos you put out a day. And but it's Jim Abrams. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was a filmmaker who did Naked Gun, Airplane, and all that stuff. Some of my favorite movies growing up. And he had a son who had really bad violent seizures soon after birth. And for years, different pharmaceutical drugs, surgeries, nothing could solve this problem. And he had tons of resources. I mean, he had friends in the high places who gave money to hospitals so he could cut in line. Doctors that people were waiting forever to see, he could cut in line, see the best doctors in the, you know, in these fields. And yet nobody once even recommended the idea of the ketogenic diet possibly helping with seizures, right? Eventually, he runs into a book. John Hopkins did some research in the 70s before pharmaceutical drugs basically replaced the ketogenic therapy for these seizures. So there's this research in the 70s. He ends up looking into it. He asks a couple of his doctor friends about it. They said, no, I don't, you know, it's BS or it's too much work. It's never going to work or whatever. They were basically negative about the idea. He eventually gives it a try. In 3 days, his child was seizure-free, never had to take a pharmaceutical drug again, off all the pharmaceutical drugs, was actually seizure-free for years until eventually he got off the keto diet for a couple days, and they came back, so it proved that it wasn't coincidental. And he ends up being, at first grateful that he ran into this, and then upset the fact that all these top doctors, nobody even suggested this as a therapy or a option to even attempt. And my point of this story is that he got to see the best doctors. He got to cut in line. He had money, he had resources, and you think the greatest mind, somebody would suggest this when this is putting so much stress on his family, on his poor child who could, definitely have some long-term effects from all these violent seizures, all these years of seizures. He had what now looks like an unnecessary surgery, and yet nobody suggested this, and nobody brought. So my point is that, like, even when the majority of these high-ranked, highly respected people say something, just because somebody else, is going against that grain, don't just dismiss it. Don't just ignore it. Do your own research, and you might find out there's some truth to it. And you might, so I think it's a really important story, because I think sometimes we put certain doctors or certain people on pedestals just because of their PhD or because they went to a fancy school or, whatever it may be. And we dismiss something else just because, Jim Abrams isn't isn't a doctor. So you might look at him and you might be like, well, what does he know? Well, you look at his story, it showed that a lot of doctors also didn't know what they were talking about, that there was other options. And he started Charlie Foundation and named it after his son, and looks into ketogenic helping with these type of health issues. So it's, you see stories like this over and over again. Not all the doctors agree with one another. Medicine, health, none of this stuff is completely right and wrong. There's tons of gray area. There's tons of James Corbett, speaking to him, did a great video I recommend people checking out, it's called The Crisis of Science. And it really breaks down, what most of us have known, that science isn't, right and wrong. There's a lot of gray area, and there's plenty of studies that been proven to be wrong later. There's plenty of just people just trying to get peer-reviewed studies published for personal reasons or financial reasons. So it's I think when you hear a doctor say something, don't just take his word for it, but also don't discredit it either. Like, look at everything with an open mind, and go from there. So, but thanks a lot, Jason. I really appreciate it.
I want to talk about that just for a second before I please jump off, because guys like Fauci, and to go full circle in this PLANdemic documentary, what do they say? Oh, well, there's anecdotal evidence about hydroxy. It's always they marginalize it if they do know about it, right? So I'm going to be having Joe Tippins on later this week. For those that don't know who Joe Tippins is a man that was completely asymptomatic, but then found to have stage 4 lung cancer, not a smoker, by the way, stage 4 lung cancer that had gone all throughout his body. This is a man that did do the chemo. This is a man that also did an experimental drug that they said at best would extend his life maybe 3 years. He gets contacted by an old college alum and told a story about a repurposed drug called fenbenzidol, the dog dewormer that is no longer under patent. Fenbenzidol, and you can check this out, there are several studies from the National Health Institute and otherwise, in association with vitamin E in these studies, was killing tumors and cancer all over the place. This is a $5 dog dewormer drug that anybody has access to. So he puts himself on a regimen of 3 days on, 4 days off of fenbenzidol, vitamin E, turmeric curcumin, and of course turmeric curcumin is known to have the anti-inflammation values, and high-grade CBD oil. 3 months later, he was cancer-free. He is still alive. It is a story on mycancerstory.rocks. Now, you can say whatever you want about that, but his doctor, when he saw he did this, started doing clinical trials. So this is actually happening. And my dog, at the time, had an extreme limp in her right arm. I had taken her in actually the week of putting out a video about Tippins and actually contacting the first time. He was leaving the country, so I couldn't get him in. I wanted to have him on, to kind of see what I should dose my dog with, or whether I should try this with her, because when I took her in, we did the x-rays. She had a hole in her arm. They showed me strands around the rest of her bones, told me she had osteosarcoma. This is a 12-year-old dog at the time. This is August 15th. I still have the paperwork. I said to them, okay, well, I obviously knew they were going to tell me it was incurable. And so what kind of a time frame are we looking at? 6 months? He looks at me and he says, 2 to 8 weeks max. And, I'm like heartbroken. He gives me a set of dope meds for my dog, and that's it. And he says, look, I can't prescribe more of this, but if your dog's really in pain, I can just prescribe another dope med, basically, a different kind of medication. I had already started her on Tippins maybe 3 days before that. Now, I went 7 days a week with her. Instead of a full kickback on this thing, I was breaking it down into a third of a packet, because obviously she's about a third of the size of the gentleman, actually maybe more like a fourth of the size, but I was doing a third. My dog's still alive, okay? That is 8.5 months ago. In fact, it'll be the 9-month anniversary, I believe, in a week that my dog is still with me. She made it to 13. She still has the limp. There was no hope that, her bone was going to heal itself. It may even be cracked more. At the very least, I believe we slowed it down. My dog is not in pain. We still go on walks. She's very, very alert. And I can only say that she's still around, and I went with that treatment. I can't say that it works. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. But I can tell you this. There's zero chance that if I get diagnosed with cancer, I'm doing chemo. There's zero chance I'm going under surgery for you to take the tumor out. I'm going to try Rick Simpson oil. I'm going to try B17. I'm going to do the Joe Tippins protocol. I'm going to cut sugar out of my diet. I'm going to go that harder personal responsibility route rather than what I feel like is that easier solution of listening to that medical professional and letting fate decide. That's not you deciding. That's unfortunate for people. Like you just said, he had the best doctors. These people don't know. They don't, they'll laugh at you. For instance, and this is breaking my heart. Hopefully I'm going to have Tippins on and I can convince my friend. Last summer, I went to my buddy's wedding, 38 years old. Okay. Finally got married. Great time. 6 months later, he's in the hospital with stage 4 cancer in his shoulder where they had to operate on a tumor. They've given him a year to live and he's doing chemo. I sent him fenbenzidol, a full 3 months of it. I bought it myself. Not that much, a couple $100. It's a guy I love, known him for 20 plus years. Sent it to him, sent him the vitamin E, sent him the turmeric curcumin, had the CBD oil bought by another fraternity brother of mine and given to him. He tells his doctor what I've done. And the doctor says this, which is kind of surprising to me. They say, well, James, your friend was very right to give you the fenbenzidol, but it's now mutated to a separate form. So we think that would be detrimental if you took that in conjunction with chemo, and it could actually hurt you. So so far he's refused to take it. He still has it. It's in his head. I'm praying to God that after this chemotherapy is done, it's a man that's not even 40 years old, okay? Had no symptoms before this whatsoever. Stage 4 cancer. I'm hoping he's going to listen. I'm praying to God that he's going to do it. And I told him he better watch my interview with Tippins. Even yesterday, my interview with Maria Farmer. She has 2 types of cancer right now. She's on the Rick Simpson oil. She described how the doctors went in, looked at her PT scan, saw that she had cancer in certain areas, and they were ready to crack her ribs and open her up and try to take some of it out when they did another one and they couldn't find it because it had become so small due to the RSO, allegedly, that they didn't end up doing that to her. And everybody can watch that interview. And Maria, actually, as we were doing this interview, just hit me up. She's been gagged. So that's the last interview you're going to see from Maria Farmer for quite some time. And she just said, thank you so much. And she just watched it again. She said, it's my best one yet. So I'm telling people, I'm nobody fucking special. Anybody out there can make a difference. And it doesn't have to be on a podcast or a video show. You can make a difference in your own community. You can make up you can let somebody know about mycancerstory.rocks. You can give them a choice. And isn't that what it's all about? A choice to think for ourselves and the choice to do with our bodies, minds, and souls as we wish, as long as we are not hurting other people.
Well, on that same topic, there's a couple podcast I probably would recommend to the listeners if you haven't listened to it yet, and also yourself. I did one with Dr. Thomas Seyfried. He wrote the book The Cancer as a Metabolic Disease: The Origin, Management, and Prevention of Cancer. And I had him on. He is brilliant. He talks about, and this guy has no horse in the race. He's not a nutritionist. He's not into to diets and whatnot, but he knows, and like everybody in kind of the cancer world knows, that glucose is an energy source of cancer cells. And he looks into how things like the ketogenic diet and getting in ketosis can help prevent, and in some cases cure yourself of cancer. And he has peer review studies, he has books, he's and nobody, you know, he's not getting the attention that he deserves. And why? Because there's no money in telling somebody to do a dietary therapy. So I recommend that. I also had Ed Clay, who's actually good friends with Eddie Bravo and some of the MMA world. He owns the CHIPS hospital in Mexico. It's a alternative cancer treatment hospital in Mexico. They specialize in the Gerson therapy and other advanced, they call it advanced immune therapies. And Ed Clay's awesome. I had him on recently. Look into the CHIPS hospital. Look into, like I said, Dr. Thomas Seyfried's book, his work, his all that stuff. If people are big in the ketogenic diet, you know of Dr. Dominic D'Agostino. Well, actually, when I had Dr. Dominic D'Agostino on, he's the one who kind of exposed me to Dr. Thomas Seyfried. So also Dr. Brzezinski, I had him on years ago. You know, his story will pull your heartstrings. I mean, the fact that we know that chemo and radiation can cause you to, in the future, get other types of cancer. They increase your chance of getting other types of cancer, but yet that's an option. But other alternatives aren't even an option. To me, is ridiculous. So I highly recommend you guys checking out the Dr. Brzezinski documentary. It was one of my first podcasts I did was with Dr. Brzezinski. My co-host at the time was very skeptical because if you went online, they did a great job of saying that he's been debunked and all this stuff. And I'm like, you know what? My co-host was Dave. I'm like, Dave, you know what? I'm glad you're skeptical because I don't want to just do a podcast where I'm just idolizing him and fanboying him. I'm like, I want somebody to listen to it with a skeptical perspective and tell me what you think. And, of course, what happened is what I assumed was going to happen. It seemed logical. It seemed like it makes sense. The fact that it wasn't even an option that people could entertain was ridiculous. So, and then, just recently I had well, not recently, I think at the end of last year, I had this documentary filmmakers. One was one of the doctors from the film, Dr. Susan, I forget what her last name is, but it's a documentary called The Big Secret, which was on Amazon Prime. It was on YouTube. You could find it everywhere. Completely pulled. It literally just goes into the history of medicine, the Flexor Report, all these really important moments in history that changed the way we looked at medicine and changed the fact that natural remedies, foods, those aren't considered medicines anymore, and how that all happened. And again, why was this pulled? Why was this dangerous? Why was Vax documentary that had a contract with Amazon Prime to forever be on Amazon Prime for free pulled? Why was the Brzezinski documentaries pulled? I mean, it's insane. Like, it obviously, Big Pharma, which most people, if you don't know, Big Pharma surpasses the spending that the military-industrial complex now. So what does that tell you? If the military-industrial complex has the influence and power to lie to the public and convince politicians and the public to go to unjustified wars, the Big Pharma can do much worse. So it's stuff that people have to stay aware of. So, I mean, I always tell people, I'm like, again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a whatever, but I've had years and years I've always been in fitness and nutrition. I've done plenty of research on it, and there's always conflicting opinions in diet, nutrition, medicine. I mean, you'll find that all the time. Even with the ketogenic diet, there's some people who say, oh, being in ketosis all the time is not the great thing or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I say, look at all the information. I guess it goes to the original point. Look at all the information. You should have access to all the information, and then let people decide what makes the most sense. And so, yeah, I mean, I have very similar story to you. I have a friend of mine who's younger than I am. I'm 35, who was in his early 30s and diagnosed with cancer. I was sending him documentaries, supplements, information, and Because I don't know, maybe because I don't wear a you know, a badge, you know, that says I'm a doctor. It's not taken as seriously, or there's something. I think there's also something scary about going to a doctor's office, going to these checkups, and then them giving you this advice and then not taking the advice, because you just assume they must have access to all the best information. They must have access to, you know, to the best perspectives and research and studies on medicine. And that people assume if they're not suggesting it to you, then it might not be something worth entertaining. But you know, my wife's mother, my mother-in-law, also passed away in her early 50s of cancer, and she, you know, quote unquote, beat breast cancer originally, and then years later, she had cancer everywhere. You know, and chemo and radiation, we know when you go through that process, chances of getting other types of cancer increases. Well, she was doing chemo and radiation, and I didn't want to get involved. I kind of gave my opinion, and I'm like, it's your family. You guys do what you want to do. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to step on anybody's toes. Obviously, it's when people are going through stuff like that, very emotional situation. It's people can get very defensive or whatnot. But I'm like you, Jason. I'm one of those people that like I can't not say anything. You know, I can't watch people not get information that could possibly help. I'm not saying it will or won't. I'm just saying it could. It's something that at least people should have access to and entertain, and then keep my mouth shut. So we saw it with her, with my mother-in-law. She was going through chemo and radiation. She would get so weak that they said, hey, we got to get her off the chemo and radiation, basically telling you, like, say your goodbyes. She's too weak. I mean, she looked, you know, awful. And then in a day or two of being off it, she looked better again. Her energy came back. She looked like she had life again. They're like, oh, she's well enough to do chemo and radiation again. They do it again and then off. And it was just like, I remember just like telling my wife, I'm like, you see what's going on, right? It's not the cancer that's killing her right now. I'm like, it's the chemo and radiation. And these are hard conversations to have with people. These are hard discussions to have. And that's why I tell people, you know, like, eat good, exercise. That's all stuff that shouldn't be controversial. You know, get as, you know, vitamins from your food, get vitamin D, get, you know, from the sun, all that, and you know, but also be open-minded to different perspectives, because there are stories, like you said, of Rick Simpson. What was it? Chris Carr, I believe, is another one who she wrote a book and did a documentary. There's, you know, story of people who have found alternative ways of fighting disease. And who are we to say that, you know, that it's pseudoscience or wrong or whatnot? So, but yeah, these are, I just figured I'll send you a couple of those podcasts I did, just in case, you know, you find them interesting or not. But yeah, Jason, I mean, thank you so much for your work. Thank you so much for being outspoken and for the discussions. Because, you know, one thing I love about you is the fact that you can have somebody on like myself or Jason Corbett and whoever, and you don't have to agree on everything. And it's all about, like, we're all in this battle together. We're all just trying to spread good information. We're seeking truth. And, you know, when people turn on each other, it freaking sucks.
It does, brother. Ricky, thank you so much, brother. And I got to get you on the program sometime this week as well. All right.
Yeah. Let me know. Thanks, Jason.
All right. Thanks, Ricky.
Hey, take care.
All right. Later on, brother.